We are continuing our study in the book of Luke. We will cover chapter 9. Jesus is wrapping up his Galilean ministry. And at the start of the chapter, he is talking to his disciples, preparing them to go out on missionary work. Verse 1. Then he called his 12 disciples together and gave them power and authority over all devils and to cure diseases. Now that word power in the Greek is dunamis, from which we get our very strong word dynamite. So it is considerable power. And that word authority is in the Greek exousia, and it means absolute rule over. So he prepared them spiritually with these two gifts, power and authority. 2, and he sent them to preach the kingdom of God and to heal the sick. They were to do two things. 3, and he said unto them, Take nothing for your journey, neither staves, nor scrip, nor bread, neither money, neither have 2 coats apiece. So they were not to take scrip. Now, scrip would have been a begging bag. So they were not to go along with asking for handouts in order to eat and to provide for themselves. That word staves in the Greek is word 4464 in the Strong, and it's hrabdos, and it means a scepter. It is wooden. So a scepter would be a staff or a stick held in a royal manner. Now, if you remember when from the previous 2 Gospels, when the riffraff come to arrest Jesus in the garden, they are bearing staves or sticks. So this Jesus telling them take no staves could have a double meaning here. In other words, don't go forth with a royal attitude, and also you're not going to need a weapon. And neither bread nor money, and no, that coat would have been an outer garment, so they were not to take an extra coat, but to rely on God to meet their needs on this missionary work. 4, and whatsoever house ye enter into, there abide, and there thence depart. In other words, when you go into a place, don't flit around, going here for dinner, there to sleep. Go where you're going and stay there until you depart. That is to save time and resources. 5, and whosoever will not receive you when you go out of that city, shake off the very dust from your feet for a testimony against them. Don't linger where you aren't wanted, and shake the very dust off. 6, and they departed and went through the towns, preaching the gospel and healing everywhere. They used that dunamis, that power, and that authority. And we still have that power and that authority to do the very same things these disciples did if we are truly disciples. We are just not taught how to use it or that we have it. 7, now Herod the Tetrarch heard all that was done by him, and he was perplexed, because that it was said of some that John was risen from the dead. Well, that would give him some consternation, as he had John beheaded. Now, Herod was a tetrarch, and tetrarch is tetra meaning 4 in the Greek, rule over a quarter. He was the son of Herod the Great, and there were two other brothers who were ruling over this region of the world along with him, and they were three of them, not four. Herod had been educated in Rome. He was more Roman than he was Jewish, and in fact, the Herod family were descendants of Esau. He had no business at all ruling over anyone. 8. And some that Elias had appeared, and others that one of the old prophets was risen again. So people were narrating around that, hey, Elijah has surfaced again, or one of the old prophets that had been put to death has come back to life. 9. And Herod said, John have I beheaded, but who is this whom I hear such things? And he desired to see him. Well, Jesus is not going to give him an audience. Of course, he will get an audience before Herod when he ends up in Jerusalem at the end. 10. And the apostles, when they were returned, told him all that they had done. And he took them and went aside privately into a desert place belonging to the city called Bethsaida. He took them apart for a bit of a vacation. They have been out working hard. 11. And the people, when they knew it, followed him, and he received them and spake unto them of the kingdom of God, and healed them that they had need of healing, even though they had interrupted the vacation. And Mark implies that these people ran around the northern edge of the lake and got there up ahead of the disciples and Jesus, but they were there. John lets us know that this particular occurrence was right before Passover. 12. And when the day began to wear away, then came the 12 and said unto him, Send the multitude away, that they may go into the towns and country round about, and lodge and get victuals, for we are here in a desert place. There's nothing here. 13. But he said unto them, Give ye them to eat. And they said, We have no more but 5 loaves and 2 fishes, except we should go and buy meat for all these people. 5 and 2, 5 the number of grace. These would have been 2 little preserved fish, likely smoked fish out of the lake tilapia, and the loaves would have been like modern day pita bread. 14, for there were about 5,000 men. And he said to the disciples, Make them sit down by 50s in a company. He had it in order. The number 50, the number of the year of the Jubilee, when all debts were forgiven in the day of Pentecost, the 50th day. And they were to be broken up into groups. And if we had 5,000 men, we also had several thousand more, because they are not counting the women and the children. 16. Then he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes, and looking up to heaven, he blessed them and brake and gave to the disciples to set before the multitude. Now the verbs there, break and gave, when we look at the Greek tenses of the verbs in the Greek, break is such of a verb tense that it was a one act. He brake the bread. But gave is an imperfect tense and implies a continuous act. He gave, and gave and gave and gave of these little loaves, and gave to the disciples to set before the multitude. Now, who is to do the feeding? The disciples. So it is we also who are to feed. We have what to feed. It's been given to us. We just need to make sure that spiritual food is put out. 17, and they did eat and were all filled. And there was taken up of fragments that remained to them 12 baskets. 12, the number of the 12 tribes. And these people in this region of the world, the Jewish people, carried a wicker basket to carry their food in. And they did so that it would, if they went through some heathen place, it wouldn't be polluted against some kind of the laws laid down in Leviticus. So it would have been kept in a basket and kept well separated to keep it ceremonially clean. 18, and it came to pass as he was alone praying, and Luke tells us several times that insights into Jesus' prayer life. He goes off alone and he prays. His disciples were with him, and he asked them, saying, Whom say the people that I am? 19. And they answered, John the Baptist, but some say Elias or Elijah, and others say that one of the old prophets is risen again. 20. He said unto them, But whom say ye that I am? Peter answered, saying, The Christ of God. And that, of course, is more detailed in Matthew 16 when Jesus tells Peter that he is the rock on which the church is built. That word Petra meaning a movable rock. And this would have been a turning point in the ministry. Remember in the last chapter when the boat was sinking and they called out for help and they said, What manner of a man is this? Well, here, these persons who have been traveling with him and lodging and eating with him along this ministry, these 3 years, they have recognized his messiahship. 21, and he straitly charged them and commanded them to tell no man that thing. It's not time. 22, saying, The Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and the scribes and be slain and risen on the third day. And he is quoting Psalm 22, which David gives us that prediction. And of course, the scribes and the Pharisees, the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders are that Sanhedrin who will play heavily in the trial and the crucifixion. 23, and he said to them all, If any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. Well, what does he mean, taking up a cross? That we must also, if it comes to it, be willing to die. For 24, for whosoever will save his life shall lose it, but whosoever will lose his life for my sake, the same shall save it. It is our soul which we seek to save, not our physical presence on this earth. 23, for what is a man advantaged if he gain the whole world and lose himself or be cast away? If all he has is the world and the life he has on this side of life, then what did it matter? 26. For whosoever shall be ashamed of me and of my words, of him shall the Son of Man be ashamed when he shall come into his glory and in his Father's and of the holy angels. 27. But I tell you of a truth, there is some standing here which shall not taste of death till they see the kingdom of God. And that is true. After the resurrection, Jesus spent 40 days with his disciples, talking with them and teaching them, and they truly did see the kingdom of God. And it came to pass about 8 days after these saying, he took Peter and John and James and went up into a mountain to pray. Now, 8 days is a new beginning. This is a turning point in the life of Jesus and in the ministry. And once again, he took his inner circle, his three, Peter, James, and John, the same ones who went in when the girl was healed, when all the scoffers and scorners mocked him in the last chapter. And as he prayed, the fashion of his countenance was altered, his face changed, and his raiment was white and glistening. 30. And behold, there talked with him 2 men, which were Moses and Elias. And God took Moses' bones, and Elias was translated. He was taken up without having to die. 31. Who appeared in glory and spake of his decease, which he should accomplish at Jerusalem. He was talking about the what is going to happen in Jerusalem. And that decease, that word is Exodus, and it is going out. So decease, think of it not like we use that English word today, decease meaning dead. He was going out. He was going out of a physical body and into a supernatural, everlasting body. (32) But Peter and they that were with him were heavy with sleep. They didn't hear. And when they were awake, they saw his glory. And that word, that awake, means fully and totally awake and aware. In other words, they did not dream this in sleep. This was not a dream sleep, but a true vision. They were fully awake when they saw the glory there and the 2 men that stood with him. 33. And it came to pass as they departed from him, Peter said unto Jesus, Master. And that's that word they used when the boat was sinking in the last chapter in the Greek epistata, and it means captain or pilot, that same term. It is good for us to be here, and let us make 3 tabernacles, one for thee, and one for Moses, and one for Elias, not knowing what he said. Peter was rattled. He was a human. What he had seen was unbelievable and startling and astonishing, and he is just prating. 34. While he thus spake, there came a cloud and overshadowed them, and they feared as they entered into the cloud, the very presence of God. 35. And there came a voice out of the cloud, saying, This is my beloved Son, hear him. Listen. 36. And when the voice was past, Jesus was found alone, and they kept it close, and told no man in those days any of those things which they had seen. But they will remember it, and they will remember it after the resurrection. 37. And it came to pass that on the next day, when they were come down from the hill, much people met him. There are scholars who think that they came down the hill the next day, those three and Jesus, that this occurrence, the transfiguration on the mountain, was at night. We don't know what time of day it was, but quite according to Luke, it is quite obvious that they spent the rest of the night on the mountain and did not come down until the next day. And behold, a man of the company cried out, saying, Master, I beseech thee, look upon my son, for he is mine only child. And lo, a spirit taketh him, and he suddenly crieth out, and it teareth him, that he foameth again, and bruising him heartily departeth from him. 40. And I besought thy disciples to cast him out, and they could not. They couldn't do it. They had power. They had authority, but they couldn't do it. 41. And Jesus answering, saying, O faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you and suffer you? Bring thy son hither. He has given them power. He has given them authority. And why has he said they have failed? Faithlessness. 42. And as he was yet a coming, the devil threw him down and tare him, and Jesus rebuked the unclean spirit, and healed the child, and delivered him again unto his father. And Matthew in chapter 17, verse 15, tells us that this is a lunatic. Luna meaning moon, that planet that is the planet associated with Satan. 43. And they were all amazed at the mighty power of God. But while they wondered every one at all things which Jesus did, he said unto his disciples, he turned to speak to these 12 privately. 44. Let these sayings sink down into your ears, for the Son of Man shall be delivered unto the hands of men. Second time, he gives them a warning about the coming passion. What's upcoming in Jerusalem, the time is drawing near. And once again, they don't hear it. 45. But they understood not this saying, and it was hid from them, that they perceived it not, and they feared to ask him of that saying. They didn't understand it. It was hidden from them. It's not maybe time for them to know, and they were too afraid to ask for a further talk about that. 46. Then there arose a reasoning among them, which one of them should be the greatest. Now that's how we are as Christians. Well, now, which one of us ought to be the chairman of the board, or which one of us ought to be in charge of the finances, and which of us ought to be scrubbing out the children's quarters, or whatever. Everyone wants to be the greatest, and this is what Jesus said. 47. And Jesus, perceiving the thought of their heart, he read their minds, took a child and set him by him, and said unto them, Whosoever shall receive this child in my name receiveth me, and whosoever shall receive me receiveth him that sent me. For he that is least among you all, the same shall be great. So he taught them a lesson using a child, saying, if you would be great, be as a child. You don't need to have the stars pinned on you, and you don't need to have the titles, and you don't need to have the worldly authority and prestige. And certainly the greatness in the hereafter will not be dependent upon your aspirations here. 49. And John answered and said, Master, we saw one casting out devils in thy name, and we forbade him, because he followeth not with us. Now, he's not one of us, and he was doing good, but he didn't believe like we believe, and we told him to quit. 50. Jesus answers that. And Jesus said unto him, Forbid him not, for that he is not against us, is for us. They may not believe exactly as we believe, but we are all children of God, and we should not belittle or downtrodden or talk down another Christian. 51. And it came to pass, when the time was come that he should be received up, he steadfastly set his face to go to Jerusalem. It's over. He is moving now toward Jerusalem, up the mountain. 52. And he sent messengers before his face, and they went and entered into a village of the Samaritans to make ready for him. 53. And they did not receive him, because his face was as though he would go to Jerusalem. He had an attitude of not being willing to tarry, but pressing toward Jerusalem as he did need to. It was time. 54. And when his disciples James and John saw this, they said, Lord, wilt thou that we command fire to come down from heaven and consume them, as Elias did? He said, they wouldn't receive you. Well, shall we just pull down fire and get rid of them? Wrong way to think. 55. But he turned and rebuked them, and said, You know not what manner of spirit ye are. You still don't get it. You're not of Satan. You don't need to pull down fire and destroy people. 56. For the Son of Man is not come to destroy men's lives, but to save them. And they went into another village. These people didn't receive, so he left. He didn't punish them. 57. And it came to pass that as they went in the way, a certain man said unto him, Lord, I will follow thee, whithersoever thou goest. 58. And Jesus said unto him, Foxes have holes, and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man hath not where to lay his head. What are you asking for? He said to this man. I'm not leading an easy life. I don't even have a home. 59. And he said unto another, Follow me. But he said, Lord, suffer me first to go and bury my father. Now that word, the bury the father, does not mean that the father was dead. What he was saying was, well, I need to stick around until my father dies and I get him buried, and then I'll follow you if I can still come. Excuses. 60. And Jesus said unto him, Let the dead bury their dead. The spiritually dead, they don't need you. But thou go and preach the kingdom of God. That's what you'll do. You just go preach. Go talk about the kingdom of God. Tell what you've seen here. 61. And another also said, Lord, I will follow thee, but first let me go and bid them farewell, which are at home at my house. Another excuse. And Jesus said, verse 62, And Jesus said unto him, No man, having put his hand to the plow, and looking back, is fit for the kingdom of God. Now, if you know anything about plowing, you are holding on to it, and it's being pulled by some horses or a mule, and your hand guides it. And if you're plowing yourself a furrow and you turn around and look backwards, it won't be straight. It'll be a mess. So he is saying, when we make a decision, when we make a commitment, it should be like plowing a furrow. We're not to look back. We're not to take care of something else before that we pick up to follow, but we are to not be fit for the kingdom of God, he said, if we have to look back. The Great Book of Luke, chapter 9.